Welcome, Dr. Tarik Oumazzane, Assistant Professor of Middle Eastern and North African Studies at the Department of History in Nottingham. I wonder if we could start by you explaining what your research interests are.
Thanks, Richard. My research interest tends to be specific and diverse. In terms of specific, I do examine the international political economy of the Middle East and North Africa region. There I try to consider the impact commercial institutions and trade agreements, their impact on political cooperation, on economic integration, and on the promotion of peace and stability in the region. But it also tends to be diverse because I'm also interested in the past. And there I look into the interaction between mainly European actors and North African actors. So the idea of colonialism, resistance, decolonization, and the idea of state building. I also investigate the diplomatic ties between those actors.
That's really, really interesting, and clearly your work has real-world implications, doesn't it? It's relevant to what people think today, yes?
Well, yes, it came after a research looking at the historiography and the scholarship that centers on the Middle East and North Africa. And I noticed most of that scholarship and that historiography tend to center on the war, on conflict, on the idea of clash of civilizations. So I kind of noticed there is a gap. There is a need to change that discourse because the region is so strategically important. It's important to itself, but it's important in the global south, but it's also important in its interaction with the global north. And I thought, there need to be some research that change the discourse, that talks about political cooperation, that talks about economic integration, that can promote peace and stability in a region that needs it for itself, but it also needs it for the world.
One of the key works, the seminal work on this that you've written, is your 2021 regional integration in the Middle East and North Africa. Can you explain how that changed the picture that you're talking about, how it changed the way we look at the past?
My book is one of the few books that doesn't talk much about war. It doesn't talk much about conflict. Rather, it talks more about economic integration, about political cooperation, about the idea of promoting stability and peace in the region. It analyzes a specific agreement. It's called the Agadir Agreement between Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, and Jordan. And it assesses to what extent this agreement has had an impact on the behavior of those states. Are those states communicating with each other? Are we noticing cultural exchange? Are we noticing more trade between those states? Are those states sending their troops for peacekeeping missions in the world? So in a way, it tried to change the discourse, shifting it away from a discourse that is that is dominated by war, by conflict, by this idea of clash of civilization, to more, let's integrate our economies, let's cooperate politically, let's join peacekeeping missions in the world and bring more peace that the societies of the region need most.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think what is important about this from a historical perspective is that, as you say, conflict in the Middle East is a thorny and difficult problem. So how do you approach something like that as a historian? We can't just let this difficult material slide us by. So how do you deal with things like that?
Yes, it is difficult, and studying the past is difficult.
Indeed.
But we got to to study it. We got to investigate it. In fact, what we need is to open a debate about it, because once we open a debate, there will be different interpretations. There will be different points of view. It's our role to find those different interpretations, to understand them, to analyze them, and put them there for the audience to understand the historical progression and evolution of this region. And hence we tackle those difficult moments in the past. I think it'll be very difficult to solve today's problems.
I absolutely agree. I think that is the role, in a sense, of historians, to help people understand the complexities, however thorny and difficult they may be, in order to deal with problems of today. Thank you very much. So moving on, what then are you working on at the moment? What is your research looking at the moment?
I'm working on a specific project now which analyzes the long historical relationship between Britain and Morocco. And more specifically, what I'm doing, I'm exploring that diplomatic relationship through paintings.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, this painting is of King Edward VII coming to the throne. This is first function as a king after Queen Victoria and the reception of the Moorish ambassador in 1902 at St. James Palace. So, having conducted some research and literature review, I noticed that most of the historiography around the early 20th century tends again to focus on the international relations between major powers and the alliance structures that dominate the world at that time, ignoring the role that non-European actors played on the world stage. And by focusing on that relationship between Britain and Morocco, I'm hoping to bring to the surface the role that non-European actors played on the global stage. Of course, there are other paintings that I am considering that goes back in time. So this is a painting of the ambassador Ibn Mas'ud. He was sent by the Moroccan Sultan in 1600 to negotiate a trade agreement. This is during Queen Elizabeth I era with Britain. But he also, I found that negotiating a military alliance between Morocco and Britain against Catholic Spain.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. And I think it's also important because widely it's believed that this character inspired the noble Moor in Shakespeare's Othello. So I'm really fascinated to find out more. Another painting that I would like that I am working on is the Ibn Haddo. So this is the ambassador of Sultan Moulay Ismail. This is mid 17th century. And what I found fascinating about Ibn Haddo, he was widely praised by the London press because of his horsemanship in Hyde Park. Yes. But he was also admitted to the Royal Society, the British most prestigious learned society. So I find that very fascinating, and I'm looking forward to surprise myself what else I can find.
I mean, really, really fascinating. And as you say, I mean, this is about really interesting characters. And you're absolutely right from a post-colonial perspective about the importance of non-European actors is a really understudied area. Now, moving on from that what you're suggesting there is that you are identifying, quite rightly, as we all do, a gap in the literature, right? And that leads me on to ask questions about potential PhD topics that you would consider supervising.
Well, I think this goes back to my research interest. I think as I divided it earlier, there is the specific side. So potential students who want to consider contemporary issues in the area to do with international relations or international political economy, analyzing trade agreements, commercial alliances, I will be very happy to supervise their work. But also I'm interested in the past and project that's going to investigate diplomatic ties, the cultural exchange, exchange of ideas between different actors, be it European actors and North African actors, or North African actors among themselves.
Yeah.
I will be very happy to supervise such projects. Right. And I think probably what I should say here is I speak 4 languages. So that's Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. So students who want to use material from different languages, I'm happy to supervise their projects. I can also probably help with facilitating access to some archives in North Africa.
I mean, really, really interesting stuff, as you said, and you have a wealth of experience there. The Department of History in Nottingham is well known for its research-led teaching. So can you give some examples of how your research has contributed to the teaching that you do for us?
Yes, well, this goes back to my kind of principle. I'm interested in unearthing stories that's been ignored, marginalized, or suppressed. And I think that goes hand in hand with what we are trying to do in the Department of History, which is to diversify our curriculum. So my research into non-European actors, their importance on the world stage, their interaction with European actors, is already feeding to things I teach in the department. So I run a second-year module called the International History of Middle East and North Africa. That module has benefited directly from the research I conducted. My special subject called the Voices from North Africa, Resistance, Decolonization, and State Building. Again, it has benefited from my research. And that goes not only in terms of the revising the content of the topics I teach, but also diversifying how we assess our students and diversifying the voices that we study in our modules. So last year, with my special subjects, we organized a field trip to London, and we divided the day into 2 parts. So in the morning, we visited the Moroccan embassy, and there was a round-table discussion with 6 Moroccan diplomats. The discussion centered on one of the themes that I'm interested in, is the theme of state building. Now these countries have got their independence. What sort of countries, what sort of states they sought to establish? So really looking at post-independence era. And the students really enjoyed discussing with policymakers things we've been studying throughout the year. In the afternoon, it was more history from below. So I took my student to North Kensington, where there is a concentration of North African communities. We visited one of the women's centers based there. So again, the students were keen to discuss with women, with people from the community, topics such as migration, immigration, nationalism, political identity, and this idea of living between 2 cultures. Students enjoyed it immensely.
Really fascinating stuff. Dr. Tarik Oumazzane, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Richard.